Now, here are Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder.
Well, hello there. Have you gentlemen gone out and done your voting yet? I'm going to do mine in person tomorrow. And then it's hard to believe we're, 77 days away from Election Day?
Here we go. It's convention week, the first
Yes.
convention week of two.
Oh, it's changed, though.
Oh, things aren't like they used to be,
No.
are they, Pat George? This is the new normal. I know that's one of Roxanne's favorite phrases. I think we've got that over her desk now. The new normal. Welcome to your new normal.
Milwaukee is crying the blues.
Oh, yeah? Why?
Lost all that money.
Oh, okay. Well, so is Jacksonville. So is North Carolina.
You say Milwaukee's crying the blues. So many things come to mind. For instance, I saw a story about Milwaukee the other day that they have to wear masks during Zoom meetings because it gives a good impression. They want government workers to wear masks when they Zoom by themselves at home because they want to set the right tone.
We need to show that we're compliant little citizens. We can follow the rules.
But
You
that
have to
makes
wear them
no
indoors.
sense in your
It makes
home.
no sense. It's insane. It's
To not
completely
get
insane.
Your own germs.
It's completely insane. It's like this concept, they're wanting us to start wearing masks outside. Remember, for a while they tried to say, Dr. Burks was saying, hey, you know what? I think we really need to step up our game and everybody needs to start wearing face shields. I mean, but you could decorate them with glitter and little smiley faces. Oh,
Emojis.
great.
Just slap an emoji on them and everyone will be happy. Call it a day.
Emoji stickers.
Yes, we're all
now
gonna
it's a
wear
good
face shield.
life. I tell you what, it's just complete insanity. And you look at a country like Sweden and what they've done, or some of the other European countries that haven't, like Denmark, that have not generally worn masks. Almost nobody in Denmark's worn masks, and they're not having a problem. And we have a story on that. I don't think we'll get to it because, one of our main themes on this show is that we just don't have enough time. I have, 50 articles here with me. We could go a lot of different directions. I've got articles I've been saving for weeks. We just can't get to them. They are important, but, there's other important things happening all the time, and I want the show to kind of be cutting edge. So we tend to focus on what's in the news right now, things like the convention, the vice presidential selection, etc. And so some of our longer-term thematic stories are getting a little bit lost, but it's just the nature of them only giving me 1 hour a week to do this. I got to squeeze a lot in 1 hour. So, let's get rolling with our quick look back, because this is a story that we reported on last week, if you remember, and that's the Cannon Hinnant story. Now, he was a young man, really a boy, in North Carolina, 5 years old, and he was outside in front of his house on his bicycle, and his neighbor, Darius Sessoms, who was a 25-year-old man, comes walking out of his house, walks over to him, puts a gun up to his head, and shoots him. A 5-year-old kid on his bicycle. Kills him instantly. It's a terrible story. It's a terrible story. He added dimension to it. Now, you may or may not have heard about this story in the news. Because
I barely caught it.
it's
It
not
wasn't on there
been
much.
Can you imagine? Compare the media reaction to a story like this to the media reaction to stories of other people's deaths. Let's say person's death at the hand of the police. Those stories are huge. I can think of a few examples from recent history, and they've been huge stories. We've had kind of like ongoing story. We had funerals all across the country for Mr. Floyd, and okay, I accept that, and I think his killing was wrong. But this story they don't want to talk about because it doesn't fit into the media narrative, right? The media narrative is that white people and white police officers are killing black people. And in this case, this is a black person who shot a young white boy. Now, there's no racial component to this. I think it's important to say, as far as we're aware, there's absolutely no racial component to this. The father of the boy, father's name was Austin Hinnant, and his son Cannon is the one who was killed. He was actually somewhat friendly with his neighbor in that he used to go over and check on his neighbor's elderly parents, so Mr. Sessom's elderly parents. He'd go and check on him for Darius Sessoms. He had him over for dinner. In fact, apparently he was over for dinner like the Friday night before Darius Sessoms came over and shot the young man, the boy. that weekend. I mean, it kind of boggles the mind. You think about it, having dinner with somebody one night, and they're presenting in one way. But the point I was going to make is the father himself said, look, there was never any kind of racial tension at all in our interactions, in our relationship. I never got any hint of that. And so there's no reason to believe for any reason that this has anything to do with race any more than a lot of the other killings and things that we see that don't have to do with race. There's really no reason to believe that unless you just go with the theory that, the police are systemically racist, and so anything that they do is a product of some kind of racial motivation, which is what the media has tried to tell us about law enforcement, which is not true. But like I said, the media doesn't want to touch this story because it doesn't fit the narrative. But what a tragedy. A couple little things. The parents want the death penalty, and, I mean, you can't blame them, right? I mean, who wouldn't want the death penalty in a case like this? I want the death penalty in this case. As far as I'm aware, there's really no factual dispute about what happened. I don't think it's not a case of mistaken identity or anything like that. The reports that I'm getting are the guy was hyped up on some kind of drugs and may have been hallucinating. Well, too bad, buddy. You know what? You're gonna get some new drugs now, and these drugs are gonna help you sleep, and that's it. And that's what should happen to this bum, Darius Sessoms. But what a tragedy! Such a sad story. They put up a GoFundMe page, which is all the rage nowadays. Whenever anything happens to you whatsoever, you got to put up a GoFundMe page. Now, in this case, though, they were only looking for, I think, they're obviously a very humble family. They're not wealthy. You can just tell. So they put up a GoFundMe. I think they were looking for about $5,000 to help with funeral expenses and other things. You know that their GoFundMe page has gotten donations of over $560,000 in a week. Whew. So people are really stepping up to try to help this young family. And certainly it's tragic. I am 100% sure that they wouldn't have traded their son for the money, but they are going to get a lot of money from this GoFundMe page.
What city was this in?
This was in Wilson, North Carolina, so up near Raleigh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, anyway, that's a story you will not hear on the mainstream news. That's a story that could easily be dominating the news right now. I mean, it could be on 24/7. That story has so much emotion tied up in it, and it so triggers emotion in the audience that it's perfect for the media. It's exactly what they want, right? If it bleeds, it leads, right? Isn't that the old phrase? So that's what they want. They want tragedies. They want violence. They want crime. That's what the media feeds off of. They get the most audience reaction, the most audience engagement. So just ask yourself why they are talking about that story. And the answer to the question, I believe, and maybe you agree with us or me, I believe it's because it doesn't fit their narrative. And they're only going to show you stories that fit their narrative because they're trying to get you to think about the world in a certain way. Now, I'm resistant to that. I don't want anybody to try and tell me what to think and how to think. I'd be happy for you to share stories with me of all different kinds, but then I want to be allowed to make up my own mind about what I think. And the media doesn't want to let you do that. So just recognize that. But big picture, it's a terrible tragedy, very, very sad story. We'll probably never know the motive, and there probably really wasn't a motive. That's the really, I mean, it's sad no matter whether there was a motive or no motive, but it sounds like the motive was simply drug hallucinations.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right. Well, moving on to a little bit of a happier story for our local interest story. The Clearwater Boat Parade. Did you see that thing? Oh, my goodness.
But another one you won't hear quite so much about in the news.
Oh, yeah, because they blew the lid off. The old world record for a boat parade was 1,180 boats. And they say, they don't have the exact count right now, but the counter has said it's something close to right at 2,000. They're still nailing down what they think is the exact number. They're going back to the video to double check their count. But it was close to 2,000 boats. So they almost doubled the existing world record over the weekend in Clearwater, Florida. And this was a Trump boat parade through and through.
10,000 flags and banners, though.
You could see them. I mean, every boat had, 6 to 10 flags and banners on it, these Trump flags. There were 1,600 people who paid and registered, and even more people who came out and participated. And my understanding is that, because I didn't make it out to that, it's probably best, because if you'd have left and tried to get out there on Saturday, you never would have made it. It's my understanding the traffic was unbelievable getting to and from the beach. So you better have stayed out there if you wanted to see it. But you can get online. You can see videos of it. People had drones going up and kind of taking the view of the crowd. And it's pretty mind-boggling when you look at the size of this boat parade. And, of course, that's all right here in Clearwater, Florida. So you're telling me there's not some kind of support for President Trump among the electorate? I think clearly there's huge support. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. Roxanne Wilder with you. Pat George as well. If you want to be a part of the show, 888-404-1010. Morgan, my sister, sent me a political test. You go through and you take this quiz online, and it tells if you're libertarian or if you're right-wing, left-wing, or authoritarian. And I'm not going to take the test.
No. Now, is that the one, because there are some of these tests that are quite famous, is that the one from the Advocates for Self-Government?
No, this is politicalcompass.org.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Well, there is one out there. Now, this is going back maybe 20 years that I remember looking at and taking this test. But the interesting thing about some of these tests is they try to put you on a spectrum that isn't left and right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because
this is a quadrant. Right.
Yeah, it's a so things are much more complicated because, on the traditional media, story that they push out to us and they say, look, you're either left or you're right. And on the left, you've got the communists. And on the right, you've got the fascists, right? The Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are polar opposites of the spectrum. But what these tests that put it on a quadrant actually do is they say, no, those are nowhere close to. In fact, those are much similar. Nazis and communists are a lot more similar than other parts of the spectrum. So those are actually the same. They fall under the category of authoritarian.
Mm-hmm. Authoritarian, yes.
Yeah.
I took the test, and it told me I wasn't old enough to vote.
I like that
Old
answer,
enough or
Pat.
mature enough,
I
Pat
like that
George?
answer. That's the kind of information you want floating around about you out there on the internet. So I always change my birth date, year of birth, and anything I fill out.
15 years old.
Yes, getting up there. So we are getting through our rundown of today's show, and we need to talk a little bit about what happened over the weekend or last week.
Some exciting news finally out of the Durham investigation. Now, it's so interesting how this came about. And those of you who aren't sort of highly attuned to some of these websites that I watch might not have picked up on all the little nuances. But, last week, Friday at 5 p.m. was set as a deadline by a kind of a well-known blogger named Sundance of the Conservative Treehouse. And if you don't follow his stuff, he's been on this Russiagate, Spygate stuff. He has been among the best commentators. The guy has the goods on these people from public sources. I mean, he just doesn't have any kind of inside sources. He just analyzes the public documents and he puts them together for you. And it's unbelievable. The analysis that this guy, Sundance, does is hard to be. You can't find it anywhere else. It is really good analysis. And he's apparently been in contact. He's been on a road trip. He's been up to D.C. He's printed out all of his analysis into little bound reports. He's made presentations to people. We don't know who all he's been presenting to and who all he's been working with. We know one of the people he's working with is Sidney Powell. He's somehow gotten connected with her. We think other people are people within the government itself and within DOJ as well. Now, based on some things he posted last week, he said last week on, I think it was Wednesday, he kind of went on a tweet storm, and he said he'd been asked to delay by 1 week the announcement that he was going to make Friday at 5 p.m. Now, you gotta. It's kind of detailed, so I'm going to kind of gloss over some of the big picture or some of the small details with respect to what Sundance was doing, but he set this deadline, Friday at 5 p.m. Either something happens or else I'm going to start releasing my reports to major media contacts, and they're going to have some extra information in them, and this is going to be a big deal. He got contacted, so he says, by DOJ and asked to hold off for a week, and he said, no, I won't do it. And then lo and behold, Thursday night, I don't know if you saw this, but Attorney General William Barr books himself in on Hannity, basically calls Hannity up, says, hey, I want to come on your show tonight. books himself in on Hannity and says there's going to be a major announcement tomorrow. Well, it won't be that major. It won't be earth-shattering. But there's going to be a development in the Durham case tomorrow. And sure enough, on Friday, it gets announced that FBI attorney Kevin Kleinsmith, who was right in the thick of all this Spygate stuff, right in the thick of vetting the FISA application, helping to prepare the Woods file for the FISA application. The Woods file is basically the backup documentation that's got to go with the FISA application to say, oh, see, this is really all true. And what we already knew he did, because we already had the goods on this, thanks to Sundance and people like Sundance, he had taken an email that said that Carter Page was a source for the CIA, and he added in the line, was not a source, to the email. Because, see, if Carter Page is working for the CIA against the Russians, then it's somewhat hard to believe that Carter Page is a Russian spy, right? Because he's working for us, and we knew that. The FBI knew that. The CIA knew that. They'd all been told that. But nevertheless, Kevin Kleinsmith feels empowered. And think about the date on this. This happened in June of 2017, so after President Trump's already president, after Bob Mueller's already been appointed special counsel, that's when Kleinsmith changed the email and submitted it as further support of the third FISA application sought against Carter Page so that they could keep spying on the president, the sitting president. They wanted to keep it going. And that is such fraud on the court. It's such an obvious criminal act. The criminal mindset to do something like to alter a piece of evidence in that way, to make it the opposite of what it really is, to totally change the character of the evidence and then submit it to a court. And there's just no way around the fact that he had the criminal mindset to have done something like that, although you'll hear some commentators and op-eds going out saying, oh, no, it's just, look, he also gave him the correct email, or he gave that to the prosecutors. Yeah, we're not talking about the prosecutor. We're talking about the FISA court, the one who makes the ultimate decision on whether the warrant gets issued. And lo and behold, on Friday it was announced he's going to plead guilty to, would you guess, 1 count of making a false statement. I mean, this is like their favorite punishment ever, to have to plead guilty to 1 count of making a false statement. I mean, this guy probably ought to go to jail. But what does that potentially tell us?
That they're going to try to get more information from him.
Maybe he flipped, right? Maybe he's working with them. So, let's see what happens. Because if he said, look, none of this was my idea. This was all Peter Strzok and Jim Comey and Andy McCabe. They're the ones that put me up to this. They told me to do this. They told me they'd cover my rear end. I wouldn't get in any trouble. Who knows what this guy said? But I just hope he said something like that, and I hope this leads to more indictments, more being held accountable for what they did, both to a presidential candidate and to a sitting president. They used the entire investigative spying powers of the U.S. government against a candidate and then a sitting president with no legitimate basis. They knew they had no basis for doing it, and they did it anyway because they figured they would never get caught. They figured at the beginning, they figured Hillary Clinton was going to win, remember? But then they had to have the insurance policy, which was the Mueller investigation, to essentially neuter Donald Trump for his entire presidency. I mean, the guy's been under fire. He's been under investigation, Russia investigation. Then we went to Ukraine and impeachment. The guy's been under investigation, under fire his entire presidency, and it has drastically lowered his ability to be effective to get done what he was elected to do. And we've got some more because, this story goes even deeper than that. And when we get into our Out There segment today, we're going to tell you about a young lady named Millie Weaver and the video that she produced with her husband, and they just released late last week. If you watch that video, it's fascinating. It's called Shadowgate, and we'll tell you some about it later in the show. But it gets into some of this, and it says, and if you watch it, it's pretty darn convincing, by the way, but it says the conspiracy goes even deeper than what we're talking about. And what we're talking about is basically the surface-level cover story for the real conspiracy. And you say, well, come on, Morgan. Not everything could be a conspiracy, right?
You mean like an iceberg?
Exactly.
You see just a little bit.
And we're just seeing the tip of it floating in the water. And there's so much more there. So that's a video you got to get out there and watch. We'll tell you some more about that in our Out There segment. just wanted, I certainly hope there's more results to come. And Maria Bartiromo was reporting yesterday that Durham is going to be interviewing former CIA Director John Brennan on Friday. Now, this Friday coming up. Now, we'll see if that actually happens. Certainly, I had heard it reported that Brennan was not a target of the investigation, which is disappointing because, particularly when you watch the Shadowgate video, you find out Brennan's kind of behind this entire system that abuses the data collection by the NSA and makes a secret side copy of it for use by private contractors, etc. So it's basically all of our personal communications that are only supposed to be captured by the NSA and then only held for a certain period of time and then only queried if they get the FISA court's authority to go in there and ask the machine to return query. Give me all of Morgan Streetman's text messages or something like that. That's the only way they're supposed to be able to get to this information, but we come to find out, actually, copies are made of this information when it comes into the pipeline, and those are just given to private companies, and there's no oversight. Nobody even knows what happens to the data. So could somebody be going through those? Well, apparently so. We've got all that to cover. One thing I wanted to, before this segment ends, one thing I wanted to get out there, Andrew Weissman put an op-ed at the end of last week in the New York Times, and this just floors me. He says, Justice Department employees in meeting their ethical and legal obligations should be well advised not to participate in, essentially, the Durham investigation. That's what he says. So in meeting your obligations, don't participate because, hey, there's going to be a new sheriff in town, and don't forget what Kamala Harris says. We're coming after all those conservatives. We'll be right back.
We're back on the Morgan Streetman Show. Lots to get ready for as far as the election goes, to think about what's going to happen in November. And we have a better eye now that we know who the vice president is.
Going to be, right? You mean the president, right? Because you don't think Joe Biden's actually going to be president, right? I mean, he's more than happy to let the American people judge his physical and mental proposal. I can't say it. Physical and mental fitness.
If
right?
they even let him talk.
They can't. They won't let him talk. He's not allowed out of his basement. He never takes questions. We got some clips from that. Anyway, as you probably already know, last week he picked Kamala Harris to be his vice presidential candidate. I was a little surprised by that pick for a number of reasons, not the least of which is she's not a very good candidate. What in the world was that? It's a ghost in the machine. Did you hear that?
That's a computer warming up for whatever you have coming up.
Getting ready.
Okay. Well, it isn't me. I've only got paper in front of me today. All right. So some interesting things came out, though, last week, and something that's automatically being, lambasted in the media in a way that really irritates a guy like me, because I don't like this when you're not allowed to ask questions about stuff, if you notice that. I don't like that. You can't tell me, you can't draw out lines and tell me, Morgan, you can only think within these lines. You think outside of these lines, that's what's called wrong think. And you keep thinking that way, we're going to have to send you for re-education, because obviously it didn't stick the first time. I don't like that. In fact, you tell me not to think outside of a line, that's the first place my mind is going to go, is outside that box that you're trying to plug me into. Well, an op-ed came out almost as soon as Kamala Harris was announced as the VP pick, questioning whether or not she's actually eligible for the position. Oh, my gosh. Are we allowed to do that? Are we allowed to see if somebody meets the standards in the Constitution for the position? Apparently not. That's racist. Okay. But the question was, is she truly a natural-born citizen? Because the Constitution requires that a person who is going to be the president, which would include somebody who's going to be the vice president, because they might have to step in, and in Joe Biden's case, they might have to step in right away, you have to be a natural-born citizen. Now, that term's not defined in the Constitution, as many people know, because we had a similar discussion with President Obama's eligibility. And, of course, it was racist then, too, to even ask. I mean, there's only a few things the Constitution requires of the president. It's only three things, and we're not allowed to ask if you meet those three things. But let's keep on the natural-born citizen line, because that's one of the three. The 14th Amendment defines it as all persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So an op-ed came out last week written by Chapman University professor of law John Eastman, who's also with the Claremont Institute, kind of a think tank, And he basically said, look, when you read that line, all persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, if it's just all persons born in the United States, which is kind of the modern way of defining a natural-born citizen, well, you were born here. That's it. That's all you need. Then you don't need the and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. You don't need that phrase, but you can't interpret legal texts by just ignoring a part of it. So that has to have some degree of meaning, or it wouldn't have been included in the 14th Amendment. So it's not just you're born in the U.S., as we want to say today, and this is a relatively new development, by the way, that is the only criteria, but it's also that you're subject to the jurisdiction thereof, and being subject to the jurisdiction thereof would require your parents to be citizens. So you have to be a citizen child born in the USA to citizen parents. And apparently we're not sure if Kamala Harris, and we think they probably weren't. One was a citizen of Jamaica, one was a citizen of India. And so she's not technically subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. She could have gone back to Jamaica, become a Jamaican citizen. She could have gone to India, become an Indian citizen. But she wasn't a natural-born citizen in the United States. Now, that's what Professor John Eastman says. You know, to me, it's worth reading his op-ed only because of the furor that has come up after the fact. And they put these editor's notes on it. You ought to read this stuff. You ought to read some of this stuff. It says, I mean, this is the editor's note. Newsweek ran the op-ed, right, which they now probably think was ill-advised because of the backlash they're receiving. So now they've got to slap an editor's note on it saying, this op-ed is being used by some as a tool to perpetuate racism and xenophobia. We apologize. The essay by John Eastman was intended to explore a minority legal argument about the definition of who is a natural-born citizen in the United States. But to many readers, the essay inevitably conveyed the ugly message that Senator Kamala Harris, a woman of color and the child of immigrants, was somehow not truly American. Wrong. That's so wrong. It goes on. There's more to this crappy note they slapped on the front of this thing. But when they're pushing you that hard to try to not believe something, you need to at least think about that. Whatever it is they're trying to scare you off of there, you need to at least think about it. And I'm not convinced that she's not eligible. I think there's a question to be explored, just like there was a question to be explored with John McCain.
I think this just goes to the fact that so many times now in journalism, not only are they going to write the piece, but they're also going to tell you how you need to interpret it.
Right.
Because you're too stupid to figure it out the way that they intend for you to, or B, because they want to control you and control the way that you think.
Right. Well, just give me some droog, some of that milk with the drugs in it, and I'll be fine here. I'll get back out to protesting and rioting. Well, all right, so there's questions about her eligibility, and now if there's one thing that Kamala Harris cannot handle, it's questions. I don't know if you remember that from her campaign where she was trying to run for president, and she would get confronted in public, and she'd be unprepared for any kind of attack from somebody. Now, I don't mean like a physical attack. I just mean asking her a tough question. She can't handle it. She's demonstrated that ability. In fact, when she was picked, I told some friends of mine, I said, well, the chances of Trump winning, I think, are just basically this sealed the deal. Because not only is Kamala Harris completely unlikable as a person, as a candidate, not only is she a complete phony in her story, her entire history is phony. I mean, it's real, but the way she tries to portray herself is phony. That's what I'm saying. If you actually look at her actual history, she is not as she portrays. But in addition to all that, I mean, she's just a really person who cannot handle the high-intensity game of politics live, which is what we're playing now. With cameras everywhere and people coming up to you everywhere, you've got to be fast on your feet. You got to be ready for the questions. You got to be able to deflect. You got to be able to dodge. You got to be able to counterpunch. All these things, you got to be able to do it all, and you got to be ready to do it anywhere at any time because of the culture that we have today with technology and cameras and video phones. So she's not ready. She's clearly not ready to do that. And we had multiple examples from her running for president where she couldn't handle tough questions. We got more examples for you today. Now, I had a clip for you, Pat George, if you're ready to go. I want to play this because Kamala and Joe have been holding press conferences, except for they're not actually press conferences. They're speeches, and they don't take questions afterward. They can't take questions. So we got a little clip from the end of one of their press conferences, and listen to the way the handlers just herd the media out of the room.
Thank you. Come on, guys.
Senator.
Thank you, guys. Come on, you guys. Come on, let's go. Come on, thank you.
Let's go.
Come on, guys. Thank you.
Come on. Thank you.
Come on, guys. Let's go.
Come on, let's go. Get out of here.
Okay, come on.
I mean, listen to that. They're herding the media out of the room, and the media's complying. I mean, what a bunch of... Can you imagine if this was a President Trump press conference? These people would be like, no, you're not getting me out of the room. I have the right to ask the president questions, et cetera, et cetera. And they'd be going off on that.
And we do have a caller.
All right.
Oh, boy. Byron, how you doing today? Thanks for checking in.
Doing well.
Byron, what's going on, man? How you doing? Tell me what you're thinking.
I'm thinking a lot along the lines of what you just stated with the whole Kamala Harris, that it's all of them. When they get questions, any politician, they just love to dish out all this information, this miscued, diabolical statistics. And then when they get the hard-nosed, face-to-face interviews, or oh, no, we don't do that. You know, we're too high and mighty.
Right. Well, you know, what do you think about her as a choice for Joe Biden?
I thought he was going to go with Michelle Obama, so I'm glad he didn't.
Well, she's slightly better than Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama, in my mind, was an early front runner for the job, and I'm guessing she must have just not wanted it.
Yeah. I just wish her the best, and I that's wonderful.
Well, he would have really been an Biden-Obama Democrat then. Remember that? Remember when Joe says, I'm an Biden-Obama Democrat. You mean an Obama-Biden Democrat?
I would have loved to have seen it just for entertainment purposes alone, nothing more.
Hey, Byron, did you see that clip that's come out with Kamala on Stephen Colbert's show? Where she gets asked...
No, I did not.
Okay, she gets asked, I want you to listen to this. She gets asked a softball question, essentially, by Colbert, and listen to how she cannot respond to it.
Because in those debates, you landed haymakers on Joe Biden. I mean, his teeth were like chiclets all over the stage, and now I believe you that you're fully supportive of him. How does that transition happen? How do you go from being such a passionate opponent on such bedrock principles for you, and now you guys seem to be pals?
It was a debate.
Not everybody landed punches like you did, though.
It was a debate.
So you don't mean it?
It was a debate. That the whole reason, literally, it was a debate. It was called a debate.
I understand.
Traveled to the debate. There were journalists there covering the debate where there would be a debate.
I guess that's the only thing she could say. It was a debate. There you go, Byron, right on cue. You're doing the Kamala laugh. I mean, exactly. This lady just thinks it's hilarious. Why? Ha, ha, ha. It's a debate.
Yeah, it's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
That's the state of affairs for our depression coming in 2029. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks for the call, Byron. Always love hearing from you. So, yeah, you can just hear Kamala Harris. I guess her message there is, look, I guess what she's saying in so many words is, I didn't mean what I said. It was a debate, you fool.
You know what I also interpret it as is that theme we always talk about where it doesn't matter Republican or Democrat. They're all in the club, and they're all happy to be in the club, and it's just part of it's part of the performance.
It's just a big party. Everything's great. Ha, 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 ha. It's a debate. It was literally a debate. I mean, she's also acting like you're stupid, but just watch. She's covering. She couldn't answer the question, but wouldn't you be prepared? I mean, didn't somebody think this question might somewhere along the way have come up from the press somewhere? And maybe we come up with a good answer, Kamala. Maybe we come up with the answer that, you know what? Right now, in this election, the most important thing is defeating Donald Trump, and I'm willing to work with whoever it takes to defeat Donald Trump. I mean, why couldn't she come up with a simple, obvious answer like that? Instead, she's basically like, look, I just say whatever I need to say in a debate, and it was a debate, so I just said whatever I needed to say. Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. Well, as usual, we have to leave a lot of stories on the table today. We had some interesting stuff to tell you about hydroxychloroquine being in the news, particularly last week. Some stories on some of the criminals that they've let out of jail because of COVID, and we've had those. We've been building a stack of those up for weeks now, and they're committing more crimes. Big surprise, right? You let the criminals out of jail to save their lives, and then they take innocent people's lives. So I'm glad we did that. I hope you know I'm being sarcastic. Also, we had over the weekend more unrest in our cities, which we've been reporting on now for weeks. You could see it in Portland every single weekend. You can see the riots. In Chicago, they raised the bridges again. They closed the loop at 9 p.m. They closed down the business district because of the looting and rioting that happened there last week. How about New York City? We've told you New York City is going downhill so fast. There were 49 shootings in the last 72 hours in New York City. This is literally the New York City of the late 70s, when it was a hellhole. Nobody wanted to be there. And it wasn't until Giuliani came in and really cleaned it up that people started to want to live there. It started to become a nice place to be. Well, we're seeing this every weekend, all week. We're seeing this all the time in our cities. And then we're hearing from our leadership, in this case, Massachusetts Democrat Representative Ayanna Pressley. And I want you to listen to what she had to say about this, because you've got to hear this, and then we're going to go out there.
I'm looking to the public. You know, this is as much about public outcry and organizing and mobilizing and applying pressure so that this GOP-led Senate and that these governors that continue to carry water for this administration, putting the American peoples in harm's way, turning a deaf ear to the needs of our families and our communities, hold them accountable. Well, make the phone call, send the email, show up. You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives. And unfortunately, there's plenty to go around.
There needs to be unrest in our streets as long as there's unrest in our lives. So I guess that means until the Marxist revolutionaries in this country get exactly what they want. And believe me, what they say they want right now is not as far as it's going, folks. Once they get going with getting their demands met, it's going to just keep going. And until that point, we need to have unrest in the streets. I mean, is this not calling for revolution? I mean, certainly borderline, and that kind of phrasing shouldn't be coming out of the mouth of one of our elected Congress people. But this is where we've gotten to in this country. Ayanna Pressley, she's a member of the squad. Look her up. Check the video. Listen to the context if you want. What she's saying there is what they all believe. Mm-hmm. Get out in the streets. Riot, destroy property, be violent towards police officers until we get our way. So forget the old school idea of elections, the peaceful transfer of power. Forget that. If we don't like what's going on, we're going to take power. And that's what they've said. We are going to take power. We've played those clips for you before on this show. All right, we got to stop with that for now because we got to flip to our Out There. And boy, this is a story that is really interesting. And again, you see more and more today, there are these areas that you're not allowed, videos you're not allowed to see. As soon as they get put up on YouTube, they get taken down. Well, they're available other places. Thank goodness there are still other places where you can find this information, because this one in particular is one you really got to go out there and try to watch. And this was a video called Shadowgate. Now, you can still find this video on YouTube if you look for it. You've got to get kind of creative in terms of what you're searching for. But one of the interesting things that makes this video so much news, it was put together by a young lady named Millie Weaver, who she used to be an InfoWars reporter, and now she's kind of gone freelance doing her own thing. And she and her husband did the interviews. I think the husband's kind of behind the scenes, does the camera work, does the video editing, things like that. And they put this really professionally done video documentary together called Shadowgate. Now, just to give you an idea of what the documentary Shadowgate is all about, I want to run a quick clip from it. This is just going to give you a flavor of what the documentary is about. There's so much detail, and you got to get out there and try to watch this for yourself, because I think you're going to be blown away by what's going on in our government, what's going on with these military contractors. And if you watch the video, Tampa is actually fairly prominently featured in the video because a lot of stuff's going on here with military contractors. But Pat, run that clip.
What if I were to tell you that a small group of government contractors were hired by government officials to frame the Trump campaign, set him up for the Russia collusion investigation, provided witnesses for the impeachment hearings, and provided administrative support services to the Department of Justice during the Mueller investigation. And what if it just so happened that this same group of contractors are behind the fake news in mainstream media, influence operations on social media, and the civil unrest nationwide pushing the defund the police movement? The Obamagate scandal only scratches the surface.
You mentioned shock value. That is shocking what the Russians did. I agree. We need to stop it.
I know that now based on the Horowitz report.
I'm not saying that you lied to the court. I'm saying you signed something that was a lie and you didn't know it.
Talk about a cover story. What really happened is much more alarming. Both parties are equally guilty of covering up what should turn out to be an even bigger scandal, Shadowgate. The tactical and operational role the shadow government played behind the scenes, carrying out the coup against President Trump.
I tell you, it is an amazing video, and she really delivers on that promise to go behind the scenes. Now, here's another interesting part of the story we haven't got to yet, and that is she was going to release this video apparently on Friday, and then lo and behold, what happens Friday morning at her home in Ohio? She gets raided by the police. She gets raided, and they arrest her, and they apparently have charged her with crimes like tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice, theft of property, which I'm assuming is some of the information that must have appeared in the video. It's unclear whether the charges are actually related to the video, but heck, the timing is awfully close, right? So while she was in jail, one of the whistleblowers who's featured in the video actually herself goes ahead and releases the video, and then it kind of goes viral. In 14 hours or so of being up online, it had over 500,000 views. And I'm telling you, you got to get out there. It's a little over an hour long. It will open your mind to some things that are going on that we have no concept of. We do not have any concept of how much military technology for influencing elections has been weaponized here in the United States and used against us. And it goes right in with what we're seeing in the news every day. And we could have, listen, I could have pulled out basically 30 minutes of quotes. This thing was so interesting. So go out there and look for Shadowgate. If you can't find it on YouTube, which you will have trouble finding it on YouTube because it's not approved, it's wrongthink, you can go to a site called Brighteon, Brighteon, and pull it up there. You've got to watch this. Folks, I'm Morgan Streetman. Thanks for joining us. That's the way I see it. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.